Hello, my name is Joanna Wheelton Campbell, and today I am presenting Inclusive Watershed Education, Increasing Access and Removing Barriers. A little bit about the Cottonwood Canyons Foundation. CCF was founded in 2002 with the mission to support the environment of the Cottonwood Canyons and Mill Creek Canyon through stewardship and education. Our focus is on three main areas. The first is a trail system maintenance and repair program. CCF's 5-person trail crew maintains roughly 100 miles of trail a year with extensive repair and rock work on approximately 20 miles a year. Our invasive weeds program monitors noxious plant populations in Mill Creek Canyon and the Cottonwood Canyons, surveying over 120 miles of trail for weeds and actively mitigating about 75 acres a year. Our final program is our education program, which teaches outdoor, watershed, and environmental education. CCF offers education through a variety of programs, and I list these programs in detail because we are hoping to illustrate a case study today, analyzing these programs on challenging barriers and potential access solutions. Our fall field trips educate thousands of learners each year at Silver Lake in Big Cottonwood Canyon. Our winter field trips offer snowshoe tours to public schools in Spruce's Campground, also in Big Cottonwood Canyon. We offer free public snowshoe tours at Alta, Brighton, Solitude, and Snowbird each weekend. And finally, our biggest programs are our Naturalist program, which offers free hands-on activities and nature walks and talks at Albion Basin and Silver Lake. And then our online education program, which is entitled Trails Online. CCF offers this presentation with the hope that it furthers the dialogue of the reality of the inequities of some practical ways to address barriers to access to the outdoors. We acknowledge that CCF is only beginning this process and know that there are many barriers that need to be identified and/or addressed. Today we will be talking about access issues and environmental injustice, specific barriers to access, practical ways to remove barriers, looking at a case study of the Cottonwood Canyons education program, and finally, challenges to be addressed. Equitable access. Today we're talking about equitable access and representation in the outdoors for Latinx, Hispanic communities, Black, Indigenous, and people of color, LGBTQ+ communities, under-resourced communities, people with disabilities, and other historically marginalized and excluded groups. In looking at racial inequity, specific studies have shown that Latinx, Hispanic, and Black individuals are less likely than their white counterparts to use outdoor recreation areas and nature centers due to barriers to access. Further, studies have found that families with children, people of color, and low-income communities are more likely to be deprived of the benefits of nature. Additionally, public lands and nature can be unwelcoming or exclusionary places for many historically marginalized populations, including LGBTQ+ communities and people with disabilities. With regard to children, evidence suggests youth experience in and access to nature and green space vary according to race, ethnicity, and socioeconomic level. Studies further suggest that access to nature provides children with myriad cognitive, emotional, and physical benefits, and early exposure to nature significantly influences the development of lifelong environmental attitudes and values. Barriers to use of the outdoors are often complex and interrelated. Studies point to barriers such as deliberate and systemic discrimination, language differences, unfamiliarity, cultural preferences, transportation availability, and program expense. Some of the barriers to access include geographic, such as location challenges, temporal, which would be time of day or days of the week, language, which is obviously barriers to communication, Economic, which could be found in program expenses or equipment expense. Physical, which could be lack of ADA access, for instance. Informational, which might be lack of knowledge of outdoor programs. Psychological, such as fear of the outdoors or social or cultural preferences. And intellectual, which could be differentiation with regard to information and consideration of age and ability. Specific barriers to access in the canyons could include geographic barriers, such as the requirement to have all-wheel drive vehicles or a lack of public transportation. It could be temporal barriers, such as activities offered during the day or weekdays when families might be working. It could be language barriers where publications are offered in English only, or there is a lack of consideration for deaf or hard of hearing individuals or signs in Braille. It could be economic barriers in the canyon, such as program fees, the price of gas, which is increasingly a problem, high cost amenities and food in the canyons, and also, again, equipment expenses. It could be physical, such as lack of ADA access to trails, lack of ADA restrooms, or that restrooms are closed, curbs and physical barriers, adequate parking, or a lack of resting stops on trails. It could also be informational barriers, such as program information offered in media that is not necessarily accessible to all communities. Psychological barriers could include in the canyons things such as cultural or social preferences, fear of the outdoors or animals, fear of hiking alone, or alternatively, fear of hiking in large groups. And then finally, intellectual barriers such as lack of differentiation for various age groups or various abilities in tours or presentations in the canyons. Today we are looking a little bit at the case study of the Cottonwood Canyons education program. Some of the things that we are doing to try to accessibility issues and decrease barriers for families and individuals are to offer locations with better accessibility. So paying attention to parking, which would include van accessibility, restrooms, wheelchair access, and resting stops. In addition, we also are trying to look at economic accessibility. So offering free equipment for our tours. For instance, our snowshoe tours, we have about 90 pairs of snowshoes that we offer for our winter and our public tours so that large groups can come out and participate for free. In addition to that, most of our programs are no-fee programs, and we do this so that we can be as accessible to the general population as possible. Finally, we also offer bus scholarships for field trips to school districts that might be a little bit under-resourced or in areas where resources are not as accessible. We also try to focus on informational accessibility, so trying to offer information and media that communities use. For instance, having access for families across the socioeconomic spectrum through their public school classes. Finally, we wanted to highlight today our Trails Online program with the objective to increase access to watershed education. We created this series where CCF could offer watershed education to students across all communities. The Trails Online program is a 5-part series which was designed to be used on a cell phone because evidence shows that under-resourced families are more likely to have access to smartphones than computers. All PDF activities in this program are fillable via phone so that students or homeschools could use the program remotely and not rely on a printer. All of the activities in Trails Online are usable in local parks or school grounds with hands-on activities that are designed to be used in any outdoor space, such as an apartment green space, for instance. Each Trails Online edition includes an interactive map to a trail in the Cottonwood Canyons. CCF tried to choose barrier-free trails, such as the Observation Point Trail at Snowbird, to increase accessibility. Finally, the program was marketed to schools and homeschools across Utah. In its first year, which was the fall of 2020, the program reached over 4,000 students, more than 50% of which were in Title I schools. CCF plans to continue the program and broaden its reach in 2021 and beyond. Some of the barriers in watershed education in the canyons that we still face are things like transportation issues or language barriers. We are now looking at providing our materials in Spanish as well as English. Another area where we're interested is increasing access for people with disabilities, specifically students with intellectual and/or physical disabilities. We do have a commitment, and our partners have a commitment, to continue to address access issues and remove barriers to the outdoors, and specifically to watershed education in the canyons. As we finish, I would like to offer accessibility to our Trails Online program, which is available to the public at cottonwoodcanyons.org/education. And finally, I would like to thank the Salt Lake County Watershed Symposium for having us, and for our partners, Salt Lake City Public Utilities Watershed Division and the USDA Forest Service, specifically the Salt Lake Ranger District. Thank you so much.